Welcome to Game Analysis Weekly, your one-stop shop for video game news, keeping up with the biggest stories so you don't have to. I'm your host, Janet Garcia, and this week we're talking about Google Stadia shutting down its internal studios, college football finally coming back, Apple's rumored VR headset, and Miranda's ass. All these stories and much more on this week's episode. Starting with Google Stadia shutting down its internal studios, changing business focus. This comes from Stephen Totilo over at Kotaku. Totilo writes, Google will close its 2 game studios located in Montreal and Los Angeles. Neither had released any games yet. That closure will impact around 150 developers, one source familiar with Stadia operations said. The company says it will try to find those developers new roles at Google. Jade Raymond, the veteran producer who helped build Assassin's Creed for Ubisoft and moved on to EA several years ago before leaving to run game creation at Stadia, is exiting the company according to Google. And on Twitter, Jade Raymond had actually stated, I am proud of the team we built at Stadia Games and Entertainment and the groundbreaking work on exclusive games for the platform. It was a difficult decision to take on a new opportunity, and I will be forever grateful to this team for everything we learned and achieved together. The head of Stadia operations, Phil Harrison, had this to say regarding the change. We see an important opportunity to work with partners seeking a gaming solution all built on Stadia's advanced technical infrastructure and platform tools. We believe this is the best path to building Stadia into a long-term sustainable business that helps grow the industry. In a lot of ways, this is a failure and an example of what people were worried about with Stadia, which is once it's not really working, Google is just going to drop it. And it's not that Google's dropping Stadia, it's just the internal studio part of it, but at the same time, that was like a huge component and aspect of what was being marketed when discussing Stadia. I do think in the long term, it makes more sense to be doing this, and I think it is their, and obviously they think this too, their best chance of success, but I still do think that cloud gaming, it's not really time for that yet. I think Microsoft's move makes a lot more sense with introducing it as this small but growing pillar in what they already offer, but what they already offer is a lot more traditional. I think Google positioning Stadia as this kind of totally different alternative that people just aren't used to thinking about games that way is a really hard sell. So we'll see what continues to happen with this. I don't feel good about Stadia moving forward. I do think that their failures will lead eventually to better things in moving the industry along. I do think cloud gaming in a lot of ways is the future, but I just don't think it's here yet. And I think on some level, Google's kind of starting to realize that too. This comes over from Chaim Gartenberg over at The Verge, and it's Apple's rumored VR headset could cost $3,000, feature 8K displays and over a dozen cameras. And they're sourcing a new report from The Information on this, and that reporting is all done in the context of a report that came from Bloomberg in January, claiming that Apple was working on an ultra high-end pricey headset that could hit stores in 2022, writes Gartenberg. Gartenberg goes on to write, The Information report corroborates several details from Bloomberg's, including the fabric mesh material that the company is said to be using in order to lighten the weight of the device and the high price tag. The new report claims the price could reach approximately $3,000, which is considerably higher than most standalone VR headsets like the Oculus Quest 2, which is $299. The device is actually said to have both VR and mixed reality applications, and that though it can go up to 8K, it won't actually be running at 8K all the time. It would have eye tracking that would determine what a user's looking at and where they can see, and just sort of having the peripheral area be lower resolution and the stuff that you're actually focusing on being higher resolution. I'm always here for more players in the VR space. I personally really love VR. I think it provides some of the most interesting and joyful experiences I've had in recent gaming history, but I also feel like it's extremely inaccessible for most people. I'm really glad to see stuff like the Oculus Quest 2, which is way more affordable, but even something like that, it's a lot to invest into what is still very much a niche market. And admittedly, the best games I've played are not VR games. They are games on PC or console. So it's kind of difficult to really advise someone to invest in something so expensive for such like a generally little payout. Again, I still really like them, but the prospect of something like Apple stepping in and doing this at $3,000, I'm gonna have to just wait until there's something way, way cheaper than that. Definitely one of the most shocking things I saw this week was the fact that EA Sports is reviving college football as a franchise. And this was shocking for a lot of reasons, because last time it was here, they weren't allowed to continue it because they were not paying players for their likeness. And the NCAA has a bunch of complicated rules when it comes to athletes making money. It is now at the point where they can make money off of their likeness, but there are still like plenty of like limitations and clauses, and they still can't make money other ways. So you can't like get a job, but you also don't get paid to be an athlete. So there are a lot of issues with how things are currently handled. So the first thing I thought when I saw this was, okay, how are they? Are the students getting paid? You know, what's going on with that? And the Washington Post had a really strong article on this. This comes from Mike Hume and Rick Mace. And I'm going to read a snippet from that article now. We've just gotten to a point now where we think it's the right time to bring the college football game back, Cam Weber, Executive Vice President and General Manager at EA Sports, told the Washington Post. And we think we can build a deep enough game that really delivers on all those other core components and bring these schools and this kind of gameplay to life. And we're at a point in time where the schools and conferences are comfortable partnering and building a college football game again. And a lot of that is excluding name, image, likeness of players. Weber said the game's roster will feature players with randomly generated names, numbers, and attributes, avoiding potential infringement on any player's names, image, or likeness rights. And that did not really sit well with me because it just seemed like a way to skirt the issue. However, according to Michael Hausfeld, who was the lead attorney who represented the athletes in the O'Bannon case against the NCAA originally from way back when, said that the return of this game is a further sign that the NCAA is losing its stranglehold on NIL-related revenue, and he is confident EA Sports is positioning itself to incorporate college players soon. And again, this is still from that same Washington Post article. So the idea is this is sort of the way to get this in, and then the players will be added after. But my question is, how long for the players to actually be added? When is that stuff going to clear? And will this product even be viable enough without having that clearance already? I'm really curious as to how people are going to receive this game if when it does come out, it doesn't have any of the actual players in it. I also feel like even though it's not their likeness, it still just feels like you're making money off of them without paying them. And even though it's pretty clear that EA wants to pay them, and that's an NCAA issue, even though it's clear that EA probably wants to pay them and that the issues are outside of that, it's just kind of another example of college athletes getting screwed over. And moving on to Miranda's ass from Mass Effect. Mass Effect has been the talk of the town this week because of all the previews that came out. And this story comes over from, and one of the big things to come out of this was the way they're changing some of the camera angles for the remaster. There are certain scenes where they're really emphasizing Miranda's butt, and that stuff's going to be changed for the remaster. And during the interview with project director Mac Walters, he had stated that Kevin, who is Kevin Meek, the character and environment director, actually called out some camera cuts that were just, why was that focusing on Miranda's butt? Walters said. So in some cases, we said, okay, we can make a change there. And I'm not someone that played the original Mass Effect trilogy, so I'm very excited about this remaster to get a kind of revamped experience to this old franchise that people really, really love. And while there, from what I hear, is some narrative significance to sort of eyeing Miranda's physique, I do think that ultimately the whole sexy angle thing is really overplayed for female characters. So yeah, not a bad thing. It's nice to think that folks are now being mindful and like maybe still including those shots, but only when they actually are narratively impactful or meaningful and not just when they're gratuitous. With Bezos recently stepping down as Amazon's CEO, Amazon's next CEO says he's committed to making video games. This comes from Jason Schreier and Priya Anand over at Bloomberg. This is a sentiment Andy Jassy, who is going to be the new CEO of Amazon, made via email to staff that was reviewed by Bloomberg. Jassy wrote, "Some businesses take off in the first year and others take many years. Though we haven't consistently succeeded yet in AGS, I believe we will if we hang in there." So, like many things, we'll see. Amazon's gaming division hasn't exactly been doing super well, which Bloomberg also reported on really recently. But this is fascinating to be a sentiment in the wake of Google shutting down its studios. And of course, more players in the game is often good for games in general. Other companies are taking interest in games, and we'll see if any of them can actually be successful players in the industry. Following up on some stories we covered in previous episodes, GameStop investors are paying it forward by donating Nintendo Switches to children's hospitals. This comes over from Kate Gray at Nintendo Life. And in the wake of all the GameStop stock madness, this is just like a nice little feel-good story of folks who made money off of this giving back to the community through gaming. And this is especially cool because Nintendo does have a rich history of being involved with hospitals. Obviously, this is not a direct from Nintendo thing, but I think it captures the spirit of how impactful giving kids in those situations a healthy outlet and a little bit of escape, a little bit of relief in really stressful times is. And another follow-up on something we touched on in an earlier episode is Lady Dimitrescu's height has been confirmed by the official Resident Evil Twitter account, which is leaning heavy into the everyone likes the big tall lady thing. So I had discussed this originally in the context of Ash Parrish's article on I figured out how tall the sexy Resident Evil lady is, because of course I did, over at Kotaku, which they had concluded that Lady Dimitrescu was 8 feet tall. Here's what the official account had to say. Hi everyone, I'm Tominori Takano, art director on Resident Evil Village. I want to use this opportunity to publicly reflect on the outpouring of positivity we've received from fans on our latest announcement. As a representative of the development team, thank you to all the fans who continue to follow us. Most recently, Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters have received a fair amount of attention, far more than we anticipated. It's great that they're able to take the spotlight as icons of Resident Evil Village. Lady Dimitrescu especially has received much fanfare, both domestically and overseas, which has made all of us in the development team extremely happy. I hear her height is something of interest. If you include her hat and high heels, she's 2.9 meters, approximately 9 feet and 6 inches tall. Now, it's pretty odd to include hat and heels in height. I do feel like Ash's 8 feet was fairly accurate because I have no idea how tall that hat is or how high those heels are. At the very least, Ash was in the ballpark with that math breakdown. But yes, the official height, if you take out the heels and the hat, I don't know why they didn't just tell us what the height is without the heels and the hat. Maybe they're waiting to give more of that information. I just think this is a funny little detail and also a way that the team is very clearly aware, not just aware of what's going on in the community, but acknowledging it. I think it is very obvious that pretty much any company that is doing its due diligence will know what fans are talking about and what media is talking about. Like, that's not a secret, but it's nice to see it actually directly acknowledged. And I'm just here for like modern Resident Evil fandom. It's a good time. I'm excited about the game. Next up, data miners have identified the exact samples used in the Super Mario World songs, which had to be heavily compressed to fit on the SNES cart, and rebuilt the songs using the full uncompressed samples. And I actually first saw this from Chris Kohler just tweeting it out, so I encourage y'all to listen to them yourself. Unfortunately, I can't include them in the show because of copyright issues, but I thought this was really interesting. A lot of people are like, oh, this sounds really weird. I hate how this sounds. It's so different. And then I went to go listen to it myself, and I was like, this actually isn't that different to me than what it already sounded like. It sounds pretty much the same, just kind of bigger, cleaner, fuller, but also with more space when there is space, if that makes any sense. And I wanted to make sure I had this sort of down on how to really explain what's going on here. So I did loop in my brother, who has been in music for a really long time and is currently a video game sound designer, among many things. And I think I have like a solid quick run through on what that really means, the idea of uncompressing the files and like restoring the soundtrack. So everything is actually compressed. None of what you're hearing in a game ever is what is ideal, because people making the sounds and the music don't have unlimited data space in terms of console memory and game memory. And that space is often prioritized to developers. And even though games are like super, super massive now, like the goal is to make it as small as possible. And one easy place to cut that down is the sound, to free up space for the developers to use if needed / as needed. So the idea of having to compress something to work is a problem even today. And obviously it was even more so a problem or a challenge with much older technology. Now, as far as like, is this what the songs were supposed to sound like? Every composer's process is different for that. Some might start with the limitations already in mind. Some might just make a good sound and a good song and then work to make it work within the confines of the space they have. So yeah, that's what the restored files really mean. Check them out. I think they sound pretty cool. More on the Nintendo side of things, this comes over from Deadline by Dade Hayes. Nintendo docuseries from Screen Media Ventures gets a Crackle premiere slot. Crackle has set March 1st as the world premiere for a 5-part documentary series playing with power, the Nintendo story. And this is just meant to tell the story of Nintendo, a company that's origins date back to the 19th century. I expect this to be a lot of information we already know, but hopefully it has new stuff that we either didn't know or doesn't get talked about as much. And of course, hopefully it's presented in a way that feels intriguing and fresh and well executed. And now for a new segment around the industry, this is just looking at sort of the meta of game coverage. DualShockers is going under a bunch of different changes. This is a notable outlet that recently had a lot of people leave. It's not always clear how much of that was of their own volition. Some of them seemed like it was a active choice due to the direction of the site, but others are sort of vague. But I did want to specifically highlight Ben Bayless, who wrote, I won't go into details on other reasons, but one reason I left the site yesterday was because I and another writer were told by owners we couldn't cover accessibility news if it's not trending. Tried to fight it, but it was just smarter to leave. He followed up by saying, yes, it sucked, but the staff there currently are trying their hardest to adapt to new changes. They've had my back on accessibility coverage for years. I adore them. The site will hopefully return to covering topics like this, but it'll no longer be from me. And I say this publicly, but I just want to applaud Ben and so many other team members, both now past or even the ones that are there. Like, I think this is a very difficult situation, and I think, you know, sort of left and right, there are always like all these industry changes with who is where and who leaves what and why they're leaving and the things that have been said and the things that will never be said or go unsaid. It's just so convoluted and dark. Making it in this field is absolutely brutal, and I just, you know, I don't necessarily judge anyone who maybe stays at a place that is less than ideal, because I totally understand that, but I just really want to applaud Ben and others who take a stand for what they believe in. Sometimes no gig is better than a bad gig, and I think you do have to figure out how to draw those lines for yourself, and I'm glad that he also shared it publicly, because it was kind of cryptic for a while, and I totally get that too, but yeah, this was just like a really shocking thing to see so many people sort of either leaving in droves or maybe getting let go in droves, and whenever this happens, it just kind of casts a dark shadow on the industry. So I did want to speak on that at least for a few moments. And then lastly, just because we're on the topic of media outlet, Stephen Totilo has left Kotaku. He was the editor-in-chief and he spent 12 years there. He'll still be in games journalism. He's taking a month off before starting his next thing, and I'm really excited to see where he goes. Moving on to rumors and speculation, the Silent Hill composer Akira Yamaoka mentioned a big project, like a big upcoming project, and said, keeping it in general terms, I think you'll probably hear something this summer to be announced. I think it's the one that you're kind of hoping to hear about. We're keeping it very general, and everyone's like, it must be Silent Hill, it must be Silent Hill. And this interview was done with Al Hub's Bo Jarade. But, you know, Silent Hill rumors are like all the time, and then they were asked to take down the interview. They didn't say who asked them to take down the interview. So now people are like, it's probably Silent Hill even more. But I don't know. I feel like every 2 seconds people are saying that there's going to be a new Silent Hill, or that there's Silent Hill news. There hasn't been yet. Doesn't mean there won't be, but there hasn't been yet. So like many things, we will see. And now for delays, the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake has been delayed. They went to Twitter and had posted, since announcing Prince of Persia The Sands of Time remake in September, we saw an outpouring of feedback from you on this beloved franchise. It is your passion and support that is driving our development teams to make the best game possible. With that said, we have made the decision to shift the release of Prince of Persia The Sands of Time remake to a later date. This extra development time will enable our teams to deliver a remake that feels fresh while remaining faithful to the original. We understand the update might come as a surprise, and we will continue to keep you posted on the progress of Prince of Persia The Sands of Time. In the meantime, we want to thank you for your ongoing support. This is actually the second delay that has occurred. The first one was from that January 21st release date into March 18th, citing COVID as the main reason, and now it's seems to be the feedback was negative, so that they are making improvements to it. I did remember a lot of people saying that it didn't look very good, but also, I don't know, it's Prince of Persia, like how good is this game really even gonna be? There is love for the old one, there is, but I just think in the modern era, I don't know how groundbreaking of an experience Prince of Persia The Sands of Time will be for players. My guess is we won't hear about a release date until they feel really confident they can deliver on it, because they've already had to delay it. Again, continuing with delays, this is a little bit less direct as the Prince of Persia thing, but this comes over from Nicole Carpenter at Polygon, who writes, Blizzard fans hoping to hear about Overwatch 2 or Diablo 4 release dates at Blizzard's upcoming BlizzCon will want to temper their expectations. Publisher Activision Blizzard said in an earnings call on Thursday that neither game is expected to be released in 2021 with no release window given. Going into games, events, releases, and updates, Apex Legends is coming to Nintendo Switch on March 9th, 2021. This comes directly from a post on EA's website stating, porting Apex Legends to its smallest screen yet is a major achievement. We couldn't have done it without our friends at Panic Button. Apex Legends will launch on Switch with support for cross-platform play, our latest seasonal content, and full feature parity with the other versions of the game. Plus, since we're launching a few weeks after the start of Season 8, Switch players will be granted 30 free levels for their Season 8 Battle Pass. For the first 2 weeks after launch, playing on Switch will earn you double XP. Now, of course, how well will it actually perform? That remains to be seen right now, but we have a release date. More third-party stuff on Switch is always good, even when it doesn't actually work that good. And it's really cool to see that this is like a one-to-one. Like, this is the same game. It is not like the Switch version. It is the game running on Switch and not the game changed in order to be on Switch, which is sadly kind of refreshing. The Hitman 3 February roadmap has been rolled out and announced, and the big thing that stands out to me from this is the featured contracts from KindaFunny and MinnMax. That's just super cool. Like, it's a really interesting crossover, and those are two like independent small media places that I really, really like. And it's just cool to see them do something that's this big of a deal. So that's what I'm most excited about with this, though admittedly, again, not good at Hitman. I'm just not good at it. Still trying to work through the base stuff, so I have plenty of content to keep me busy just from that. But if you're someone that loves Hitman 3, I recommend checking this out. Now, also, it's worth noting the inclusion of KindaFunny and MinnMax is the idea of the contracts. You can't, like, kill the show hosts in the missions or anything like that, though maybe one day, so fingers crossed. Final Fantasy XIV's new expansion Endwalker has been revealed. Now, I'm not someone who plays Final Fantasy XIV. It comes out in the fall of 2021 and is written by Wesley Yin Poole over at Eurogamer. It's got multiple new jobs, including new healer job Sage, new areas including the city of Raz Athan, an increased level cap from 80 to 90, tweaks from the battle system, and new challenges. And a new threat is Anima from Final Fantasy X. And the Mass Effect Remastered Trilogy finally has a nice release date of May 14th. And for the Shut Up and Take My Money section, Build-A-Bear releases a new Mew Pokemon plush. This is from Rebecca Valentine over at IGN. It is an online exclusive bundle that includes a Master Ball hoodie, a Mew cape, and a 5-in-1 sound effect, totaling $61. So I'm actually going to play what that sound is like. So this is what Mew sounds like in the Build-A-Bear Mew. That's kind of really adorable, maybe also sort of annoying, right? Like, let's be real, let's call a spade here. But, like, it looks cute. I actually had a Mew doll when I was younger. It was, like, super hard because it had, like, the sound pack inside of it, so it wasn't, like a plush at all. And I will say that some of the Build-A-Bear Pokemon stuff is really well made. The Build-A-Bear Bulbasaur is a must-have. If you don't have Build-A-Bear Bulbasaur, like, after this is done, go buy Build-A-Bear Bulbasaur. I don't know if Mew will be at that level, but I can hope, And lastly, Sonic fans will be excited to hear that there's going to be a Lego set, an official Sonic the Hedgehog Lego set. This was originally a Lego Ideas fan submission that did end up getting approved from Sega and Lego. Price, date, and finalized version of what it's going to look like has yet to be announced, so stay tuned for that, but it is in the works. It will be existing. It will be a thing you can buy and own and put with the rest of your like nerd stuff that just takes up space, but like it's sometimes it's nice to just have things you like that take up space. Nothing wrong with that. And that concludes this week's episode of Gameonasis Weekly. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, you can head over to patreon.com/Gameonasis to support the show directly, as so many others already have. And of course, be sure to rate this on any podcast services you have access to. Give us a like on YouTube. Leave a comment down below if you're on YouTube. And if you're not listening on YouTube, you can go ahead and at me on social media. My handle is @Gameonasis across the board, or you can email me, gameonasis@gmail.com, and I will see y'all here next time. Bye!